How's it going, everyone? And welcome once again to another episode of Animal Talk Podcast in collaboration with SACA, the South African Animal Keepers Association. My name is Ryne.
And my name is Ayrton. Hey Ryan, how are you doing today?
How long do we have?
Not that long.
Okay, then we won't talk about it. No, I'm doing okay. It's been a challenging couple of days, and they seem to just become more challenging. Just to let everybody know, I moved from the KZN South Coast back up to Johannesburg, so it's been a little bit taxing and stressful, and it's also me moving my pets with me, and yeah, things have just been a little bit stressful. So yeah, ups and downs, but otherwise I'm okay.
I'm glad to hear. And, that's why I think today's topic is also going to fit in perfectly. And it's one of the reasons I thought maybe we could talk about this today is because whenever you're changing environments, there's a lot of new things that tend to come your way. And especially, if you have pets, there's a lot of new things in their environment. So I thought today the topics that we can discuss and throw around and have some fun with is habituation and desensitization.
Dun dun dun. Sounds good. Yeah, that's exactly kind of what I've been doing this whole last couple of days.
So, yeah, perfect timing. If you are listening to this episode and you're thinking, oh my word, I don't know what that is, don't worry. We are going to explain it. Yeah, we're going to go through it, give you some examples, and also just chat about how you can apply it to the animals you're working with, if you're in the industry, or with your own pets at home.
Yep, indeed. So we'll dive straight in.
Amazing. So, I'm always loving putting Ryan on the spot. So, Ryan, do you mind if I put you on the spot again?
Of course.
What would you say the main difference is between habituation and desensitization?
Well, you really are putting me on the spot. Okay, so habituation is how I see getting used to certain routines, and desensitization is more to do with environment and objects and those type of things. How am I doing with that?
That's interesting. Different perspective. I did cheat a little bit. I did go and have a look at the definitions beforehand, just so.
Chat GPT.
No. So sometimes I don't really trust what ChatGPT says about training stuff. So, go back to the good old school.
That's a whole nother podcast to talk about.
That is a whole nother podcast. Going back to the old school animal behavior books. So that's where I managed to find this. So I think we should be good. Um,
At least you have that. Mine's still down in case it did.
Gotta try, get it up there. They're really important to always have.
Yeah.
But habituation is basically we're talking about it's habituation and desensitization is about these, new things in an environment that for in this case we're going to talk about animals that they are basically facing, and it's going to be something that basically they're not comfortable with. There might be some fearful reactions around it. It could also be the opposite way. It could be, item that causes great excitement and you want to reduce that excitement as well. So the main differences between habituation and desensitization. So let's start with habituation. But basically, it's something that is being exposed to that animal, and it's going to be repeated over and over with not much change. And over time, that animal basically starts to cope on its own. So if I can give you a
I
really.
was kind of right.
Were you?
Yeah.
So just to give you a really simple basic idea for understanding from a human perspective is if I move into a new apartment and there is a neighbor that has a really noisy car, and you first move in and it's really loud and it's really annoying and it really just annoys you because you have to hear this car all the time. But over time, you're going to keep hearing that vehicle, and slowly but surely it's going to become less and less of a problem for you because over time you get habituated basically to the sound of the vehicle. And then I'm sure we've all been there where it literally gets to the point like 2 years down the line, you don't even hear the vehicle anymore. So that's kind of sums up habituation. For an animal, it could be something simple like if there's a loud train that goes past. And what's going to be happening is obviously that train goes past the animal at the same time, same distance, same speed. So nothing ever gets changed in terms of the stimulus or the item that is being presented to the animal. I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
I was actually about to say, there's a lot of sounds that I'm not used to anymore being up here in Joburg. And I mentioned sounds to my dad, and I'm like, did you hear how that plane sort of decelerates because we're quite close to the airport? He's like, I don't even hear that anymore. So there's a lot of things that he's now completely habituated to that I'm not anymore. And I pick up all of those little sounds and things that are going on, which will take some time for me to learn or get used to them. So that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, that really is. And now moving on to desensitization,
Ooh.
kind of a similar principle to habituation, but what we're doing is we're using lower increments and we're slowly building that up. So if we go back to a pet example, so if your dog, for example, doesn't like the sound of loud fireworks, a approach for desensitization might be playing a video of fireworks in the background at a really, really low volume. And what you're going to do is you're going to reinforce that animal for being calm in that moment while there's the stimulus being presented, but at really, really low intensities. And then working with that, we're going to start increasing that intensity, but still reinforcing. So it's more kind of a training approach to essentially help animals cope with something that's new or something that's scary. So yeah, that's, I don't know if that kind of sums it up, but hopefully that gives you a bit of of a clear idea of the differences between the two.
I love how training gets embedded into a lot of things when it comes to the topics that we talk about, because it's so important how training enables you to have a tool that you can actually assist animals in welfare and management and behavior and a multitude of things. And now we're talking about desensitization. So it's very exciting.
It is very exciting. And there's so much specifically in animal training that you can really use as a tool in everyday life. I mean, I know I mentioned it now briefly before we started recording this episode, but even desensitization and habituation can really be used in terms of overall people and people well-being. If you think of somebody that, I know we work with it a lot in the industry, we have a lot of visitors that come through, and especially if you have a reptile exhibit or a spider exhibit, people tend to avoid those areas if they don't feel comfortable. But quite
A
often,
shark exhibit
a shark
when it comes
exhibit,
to me.
I don't know,
Yeah.
I tend to find a lot of people feel less stressed about the sharks because there's the acrylic windows. And for some reason, I don't know if it's because there's acrylic and there's water, that they feel that if those animals are ever outside, it would be very
Different.
different than if it was a snake or a spider.
So
um
here's a good reason to go and visit the aquarium if you do have a fear of sharks and you want to desensitize yourself to it. That's a good way because you'll feel a little bit more comfortable seeing them behind the acrylic, and you might feel a bit better of them over time.
Indeed, but take something like chuckles with you. So every time you get it,
Or
every time
coffee.
you get exposed to the fear, you can just eat some chuckles, and it can,
Be
help with
like,
the
oh,
situation.
reinforce yourself.
But
Love it.
in a real, like, serious sense, I mean, we need to think about this when we are presenting animals to members of the public. Especially, I remember a good few years ago, I was very fortunate enough to work with a mole snake that we had at the facility, and because I was its main keeper, I got to take it out and move it around the facility, and also do interactions with members of the public. And it was so surprising how you would encounter people that were so fearful and scared of this poor mole snake, but just through, you know, really using like a desensitization approach of standing further away, forming general conversation, asking them about themselves, talking about the animal, and then slowly building up that intensity of moving closer and closer, keeping the conversation nice and friendly and keeping them engaged. A lot of the time, we were able to get a lot of our visitors over the fear. I mean, they're not going to necessarily go out and want to hold a snake, but to come closer to potentially interact with the animal as well. So it's definitely something that we need to have in our back pocket, because it's something we can really apply to our visitors, to people in the workplace, of course to the animals that we look after as well.
Yeah, so similar situation like I'm having. We are moving from a different province, and having to travel quite a vast distance, and now having to sort of get my pets all settled down and sorted in their new accommodation. How does one go about that? Let's kind of iron that one out.
Well, I think the first thing you need to look at is the situation. So trying to think from your animal's perspective, and really just monitoring and evaluating their general behavior. So looking at when we are seeing stress behaviors and what they're telling us. So when do those occur? Is it when vehicles drive past the house? Is there maybe a portion of the the garden or the house that they don't, you're seeing more stress behaviors happening in? So the more information that you can essentially get, the more you can be in a good standing to assess and really guide the situation. So I think with any situation, and it gets really tricky with animals, because there's only so much body language and behavioral cues that we can follow, that we can't necessarily have a full-on conversation like you would with another human being. So we really need to tune ourselves into their behavior and see what they're telling us, where there might be something that's causing fear or stress or anxiety.
Indeed. So I think very important, and you've sort of covered it there, but very important is to take it at the animal's pace, because it's a completely new environment for them. What I have done now is I've put them into the environment and I've watched them, just spent the entire day just watching them, seeing how they interact with things, seeing what they do. And like you said, looking at body language, how do they feel about things? And that gives me an idea of what I might need to do to desensitize them to something, or try and change things around a little bit so that it makes it a little bit easier for them to feel more comfortable. Another thing is bringing some things that smell like them or smell like the previous home into the new place. I find that that also has helped a lot in many of the moves that I've done in the last couple of years with my pets, is when they recognize a familiar smell or some familiar items, there is a lot of better body language and tolerance to the new environment. One other thing, which is quite interesting, and this goes back to animal behavior, I have three cats and two dogs, and they've sort of grown up together. And when I have the cats on their own without the dogs, they are very nervous about new environments. But as soon as I add the dogs into the environment, they calm down and they feel a lot better, because the dogs seem to show better body language, that they are more relaxed and calm than the cats do. And the cats pick up on that and they start to show better body language and sort of getting used to the environment. So that's a little bit of a background there on that.
Yeah, I think if you think from a human perspective, if you are in a situation, a completely new environment, and you in a new place, you sitting in a room with a bunch of people that you are quite familiar with, and generally they're quite calm, and you know them fairly well, but they start stressing. I mean, you are also essentially going to be feeling quite uncomfortable, because you are in this situation and you're going to be picking up on their energy. And I'm sure we've all been in this situation where someone that we've known for many years, and they're generally quite a calm person, but all of a sudden something happens and they're stressing and they freaking out, and immediately for you it's like, oh my word, this is something to worry about, because Ryan over there, who's normally always calm in every situation, he's panicking a little bit. So I think I need to also panic. So I think it's something that we can definitely relate to. And then the next thing I would do is and this is something I'm going to try when I go back to work as well, because I think this might be really effective, is taking maybe like a notepad or a piece of paper and drawing a line down the middle and putting habituation on the one side and desensitization on the other. And then based on, the animals that we are observing and looking at, make a list of things that they need to be habituated to, and then on the other side a list of things that they need to be desensitized to. And what we need to really just differentiate between years, habituation is something that might necessarily be items that aren't really in your control. So Ryan can't be at home all day for his pets, and there might be loud cars that go past. But over time, that is something that they are going to naturally get used to, because it's going to become, something that happens quite frequently. And over time, that stimulus is going to be reduced in terms of a stressor for those animals. And eventually, when the cars do go past, they'll be habituated to it. Then desensitization on the other side, just to give you more of examples, would be looking at stresses that, they don't necessarily happen or occur frequently. And it's something that, you can actually manage with animal behavior. So like we said with, the fireworks example, but something really basic might be, loud trucks that go past. You can definitely find, videos on YouTube of loud trucks and car sounds that you could play in the background, and then slowly build that up. So start it on a very low volume and monitor their behavior when they're in the living room, for example. Let the sound be there, but don't make it that it's overwhelming for them. And when you notice that they're comfortable, they're not showing any stress behavior, you can increase that volume of that sound. So you're essentially creating almost like a decoy that helps them to slowly process, what's happening in these situations, and that's going to essentially help them in the real life situations when they get exposed to it eventually down the line. The problem that we have with desensitization is you have to follow those steps. You have to go up in slow increments, and often when there are things that aren't in our control, so you desensitizing your pet to truck sounds, and then you let them go play in the garden and a very loud truck comes past, and obviously that's going to work in the opposite direction. It's going to be very much opposing of all the training and desensitization that you've done. So just keep in mind that that can happen, and then you're going to have to start all the way back at the bottom. Another, I think, good example that I could give you, Ryan, that you probably also, I mean, they should be used to it from KZN, but it would be thunderstorms as well. So thunderstorms, lightning. So a lot of it might be sound stuff that you can definitely use desensitization for, because there's so much sound material that you can use as a stimulus to provide for them.
100%. I think a sort of one that I can say for now, where I've been monitoring a behavior of one of my cats, and that is when people are walking past. So where I used to live was very quiet. We were in a cul-de-sac, very quiet road, and you occasionally get people walking and talking going past, but it was very much non-existent for most of the part. Now there's kids coming from school, there's guys moving bins and trolleys and things up and down. And every time there is that sort of stimulus that's happening, he makes this like growling sound, trying to sound like a lion, I'm guessing. He then sort of makes himself very low and then sort of squeezes past everything and tries to find a place to hide. So, what I've been trying to do is when I know a lot of that action is going to be happening, I'm near him. I'm sort of giving him a little bit of tactile reinforcement. I've got the other cats with me, the dogs with me, and they're all showing calm and collected behavior. And it's slowly getting to the point where he's not doing it as much as he used to. However, there are times where he feels a little bit overwhelmed because it's a lot of noise. And it's a bit difficult for me to now change up everything and try and calm him down. So I just let him do his thing, and then we'll work on those louder sounds and those things as time goes by.
Yeah, indeed. It's kind of exciting from a from a training perspective. And I did mention it earlier, but I just thought maybe we could chat about it now as well. A third thing we can talk about is counter conditioning. And it's kind of very different in the sense of desensitization and habituation. We're talking about, new, novel kind of items coming into the environment. So something that they haven't necessarily already been associated with. Counter conditioning is different in the sense of you have an animal that has a negative association with an item. So the animal's already made up its mind that this is bad and scary, and every time this happens or this comes past, nothing good follows. So what you're going to be doing with counter conditioning is you're going to really be using essentially conditioning practices. So I think we have chatted briefly before with, classical conditioning and pairing food with like a clicker or a stimulus like a dog whistle, and essentially you can use that in counter conditioning. So what we're looking for is every time the negative kind of stimulus or the item that has the negative association with that animal, whenever that occurs, we want to try and follow it with something positive to try counter the conditioning that the animal has already been conditioned to, if that makes sense. So if there's a really scary sound that I know of that is scary for me, and then I am given something like a slice of chocolate cake, every time that happens, what's going to slowly happen over time is every time I hear that sound, I'm going to think, oh, that's scary, but you know what? It's okay, because as soon as it's gone, I'm going to get something that I really like. So that's definitely something that we can also keep in our pockets and keep in our toolboxes in terms of modifying behavior and assisting animals that have already built an association with the item.
Yeah, I like that idea. It's very important.
Very important indeed. And like I mentioned, I'm definitely going to be trying this out on some of the animals that I get to work with and also some of my colleagues.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of times where we can work on desensitization in our own personal lives, not just our animal lives and colleagues' lives. But we could probably, you and I could probably talk about training and behavior and all of this desensitization and habituation for probably hours on end. But we've only got a short, tiny little amount of time that we need to fit all of this in. So I think if there's anybody that wants to talk a bit more about it, got some questions, you could put them out to us and we could maybe answer those questions on the podcast. I'm sure we'd be very happy to do that for you. So if you do want to get hold of us, you can get hold of us on our email, which is animal.talk201@gmail.com, or you could contact us via social media.
Yes, definitely. Reach out to us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or YouTube. Our handle is Animal Talk Podcast _ZA. Please go and subscribe to our YouTube channel, like our videos, and go and like and share our posts across the social media platforms to help us really just spread Animal Talk Podcast far and wide.
100%. And if you would like to know a little bit more about SACA, the South African Animal Keepers Association, there will be a link in the description, or you could follow our social media and you'll also see some links there for that as well. And another big thank you to eRadio for allowing us to be on the radio every Saturday at 10 a.m. But from myself, animals are our passion.
Thanks everybody for tuning in, and remember that our quality of care is their quality of life. Bye everyone.
Bye. Sorry, I'm just waiting for the clock to finish chiming its chimes.
Shh, clock.
Okay, it's finished chiming its chimes.
Well, just give it a few months because you're going to be habituated to the sound of that clock.